as I also always like to acknowledge all of your, as in people attending this meeting, all of your elders, and acknowledge the various journeys and consequences that bring us together tonight to share our experiences. So thank you everyone for being here. I'll start by introducing myself. My name's Danny Alcock. I work for YSAS, so Youth Support and Advocacy Service, which is a statewide youth support service, mostly offering drug and alcohol support, but lots of other support to young people aged 12 to 25 in and around Victoria. So I'm based in Dandenong and look after our drug and alcohol community-based drug and alcohol staff who work across the cities of Dandenong, Casey and Cardinia. I'm also working at the moment acting as a regional manager while my boss is away in Thailand. So that extends my range, I suppose, to cover Gippsland, the Latrobe Valley, Bass Coast, and out into the eastern suburbs, out to Ringwood and beyond. So it's a pretty big role, and YSAS is a great service, so offering drug and alcohol services, as well as support for young people that are in the criminal justice system. We run some crime prevention programs. We run a number of residential support programs and support not only young people, but their families as well. And a big focus of ours, particularly in the southeast and in the western regions of Victoria, is supporting the culturally and linguistically diverse communities, particularly new and emerging communities that are coming into to live in Australia and have been living in Australia for some time, to help integrate. And I guess my point is that, you know, we really try and understand and work in a culturally inclusive way to support people from diverse communities to access our services. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some drug and alcohol information, so different substances that we come across or young people access our services for support and families, and try and answer some questions that we think are probably important that you might want to know. And feel free to either put your hand up or just yell out while I'm talking if you've got a question, or if something I talk about isn't clear. Please don't be shy to ask. There's no such thing as a silly question, and usually I think if you're asking yourself the question, other people in the room are probably asking the same question. So it'll be a benefit for everybody to hear the answer to that. And I don't profess to know everything. If I don't know the answer, I'm happy to write it down or take it on notice and go and find out and feed it back to you. So a little bit of alcohol. So AOD stands for alcohol and other drug. So AOD information is alcohol and other drug information. Again, I've been working in this drug and alcohol sector for 20 years. So sometimes it's almost a second language for me. So sometimes I might talk about things that are clear to me, but sometimes I can forget that people don't always speak the same terminology that I do when talking about this sort of thing. So if something's not clear, please feel free to put your hand up or ask a question. So we'll a bit of drug and alcohol. As I mentioned, I want to try and facilitate an open discussion tonight. So feel free to ask questions, or if there's something specific that you want to know, please let me know during, or there'll be some time afterwards if you want to jot down some notes and hold your question for the end is fine as well. I'll be focusing on, well, not focusing, I'm talking a little bit about the various stages of change, which is a model that we use when working with people that have got drug and alcohol issues to set goals and work towards goals. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and it just helps understand when we're talking about drug and alcohol treatment, the stages of change model sort of helps identify where people might be at in terms of their own motivation to change or to set some goals and change something about their, in this case, drug and alcohol use, but we can apply it to lots of areas of our life. So I'll talk a little bit about that. Again, if you've got a question, please feel free to ask, because, it's a great opportunity to learn from each other. And I, although I've got a lot of experience in this area, I don't profess to be an expert. So if there's something that you can teach me, or if there's something that I'm not sure of, or, then I'm hoping to be able to learn from you in this room as well. And a little bit about help seeking. So I guess it stems on from the stages of change model that, help seeking should be encouraged and is a strength. And when people reach out for help, it's not always easy. And we'll talk about some ways that we can encourage that and support people to actually ask for help, because often we find that people don't ask for help until the very end, until sometimes it's too late, and the problem's almost much bigger than what it is that we can fix within our own resources. So we know if people reach out for help and seek help early, the likelihood of us being able to support them to make changes or solve the problems is much, much higher. So we encourage help seeking. Sometimes people don't know where to seek help from. So sometimes it's just about pointing people in the right direction and letting them know where they can go to get some help. And go from there. I probably need to acknowledge Nishan and the Nas Recovery Service at YSAS. We try and work closely. We've got a great relationship with Nishan and her team, and try and work closely with her and the community to support people to access drug and alcohol services. So thanks, Nishan, for inviting me here today. Okay. Any questions from before I start? No, that's good. And just to acknowledge that, this it's important for me to create a safe space, and where possible, we can share our own experience or experiences in the discussion. As I mentioned, encourage questions after the session as well. And I guess, this is an opportunity for a safe place to be able to ask questions that you might not be sure about. So yeah, feel free to do that. Okay, so I'll start with the most basic. So what is a drug? So it's defined by any substance that changes a person's mental or physical state. I guess they're broken up into, legal drugs and illegal drugs. And sometimes it's not really clear what's legal and what's not legal. Most of the people that we deal with at YSAS are using illegal drugs, or sometimes we can talk about drugs that are actually legal and prescribed by doctors that are used illegally. And sometimes there's a perception that those drugs that are just because they're prescribed by a doctor are much safer and okay to use. And I guess a drug, when we're talking about drugs, we include alcohol in that conversation as well. It's a drug, and it's a legal drug, but it causes just as much damage as some of the illegal drugs and some of the prescription drugs that are prescribed by doctors that people can get become dependent on, and get into a lot of trouble with. So it's a broad term, substances or drugs. And just to clarify that when I'm talking about drugs, I'm including some of those drugs that might be deemed as medication, but also alcohol in the same conversation. Is that clear enough for everybody? Has anyone got any questions about that? No, that's good.
No, it's
Okay.
clear.
Oh, Sidonia?
No, I'm saying it's clear. It's all good.
It's all good. Excellent. Thank you. That's good. It's nice to hear some talk back, as I'm not just talking to myself. People can actually hear me. So some of the substances that we see at YSAS and drug and alcohol services. If you can see the screen that I'm sharing, so I mentioned alcohol, cannabis, also known as marijuana, ganja, pot, weed. There are a whole lot of different names for a lot of these drugs, and sometimes it's not always clear what people are talking about when they talk about weed or hallucinogens or some of these other drugs. I guess having worked, in the sector for a long time, I know most of the names, but even after 20 years, young people still refer to certain substances with names that I've never heard of before. So I always make a point of, if I'm not sure, of clarifying, asking the young person exactly what they're talking about. So I'll just go through some of these. So alcohol, obviously, is clear. So there's different spirits, beer, wine, different strengths of alcohol. Cannabis, hallucinogens. So hallucinogens are a category of drug, and there's lots of drugs that cause people to hallucinate. And by hallucinations, I don't just mean they see things that aren't there. So they're sensory hallucinations. So they can see things, they can hear things, sometimes feel things. So it's a distorted reality. Sensory reality on that the drug causes, and sometimes it can actually cause people to become quite afraid and unable to tell the difference between reality or what's real and what's not real. So a lot of drugs cause hallucinations in high amounts. So some of the drugs that I'm talking about, actually, cannabis can cause people to hallucinate. If people drink too much alcohol, can cause people to hallucinate. But there are certain drugs that are hallucinogenic substances, such as magic mushrooms, LSD, which is a acid and known under various names. So the picture that you can see there with the little hearts, LSD often comes on little pieces of paper that might not look like much, but actually contain quite a strong substance, and lots of other drugs. So MDMA is the next one there. MDMA is the same as ecstasy. It comes in various forms, tablets that look like lollies. Can be white, pink, red, green, yellow, blue, all different colors, often with a little stamp on them. The active ingredient in MDMA or ecstasy, it's the same thing as an amphetamine type substance called methylene dioxymethamphetamine. So it can come in capsules, as you can see there, powder form, or in pills that look like lollies and all sorts of different things. Mostly known as ecstasy or MDMA or MD. Heroin is another illicit substance. So comes in lots of different forms, is usually either smoked or injected. I'll just go back with MDMA is usually taken orally, so it's usually taken by mouth, whereas heroin is either usually smoked or injected. It's opium, can cause people to become quite physically dependent or addicted to it. It can be quite difficult for people to stop using, given the withdrawal symptoms associated with heroin dependence or addiction. So the other one that I've got there is benzodiazepines, and it sort of lumps in with prescription medication. So benzodiazepines are mostly medications that are prescribed by doctors to help with anxiety disorders, people who experience panic attacks, high levels of anxiety, and are designed to be prescribed for short periods of time. So some of the drugs that included in benzodiazepines are Valium, Xanax, temazepam, a few others. Nishan might be able to jog my memory. So they come, it's a group of drugs that are prescribed by doctors that come in a whole different range of titles and strengths. They are very...
Opiates.
Sorry, Nishan?
Opiates?
Opiates aren't benzodiazepines. So opiates, no, but I'll get on to opiates in a second, but opiates can be prescribed as well. So benzodiazepines are a class of drug that's...
Mood stabilizers, maybe?
Different to mood stabilizers. Mood stabilizers are psychiatric medication that are usually prescribed for people that have got schizoaffective disorders, sometimes depression. There can be a group of drug called SSRIs or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors that work on certain parts of the brain that help to stabilize mood. So benzos, often called benzodiazepines, are drugs that they're relaxants. So they're a depressant. They come in a depressant category. They don't make you depressed, but they slow the messages down from your central nervous system to your brain, designed for people to help them overcome anxiety disorders and panic attacks. Usually people who have experienced a lot of trauma and are experiencing anxiety will be prescribed either Valium or Xanax or temazepam or something like that, just to help relax and help them be in a position to... Sorry, my dog's just made its way into the room. So they can get effective psychological treatment, so overcome the symptoms, to be able to get psychological treatment to address what's causing the anxiety in the first place. As I mentioned, they're only designed to be prescribed for short term. If they're used in high levels for a long period of time, people can become quite dependent on them or become addicted to them. And their tolerance goes up to them quite quickly. So the more they take, the more they need, and the more they become dependent on using the medication to be able to cope with whatever's causing the anxiety or cope with the anxiety. So it can be very, very tricky. They are also used illicitly, so very popular with young people, because if they're used with alcohol, it sort of enhances the effect, and people can become quite a pleasurable feeling. And yeah, so it's something that we see a lot of young people use. It has an sort of an amnesic effect, so it can cause people to lose their memory. And we hear a lot of young people who have used particularly Xanax, which is a benzo, committing crimes while they're on these drugs. It reduces their inhibitions, and they do things that they wouldn't normally do, and not remembering the crimes. I had a client a while back who had taken some Xanax, some benzos, and was walking around a pharmacy, just taking things off the shelf, putting them into his bag. Didn't realize the pharmacy worker was actually just following him around the pharmacy, watching him and filming him, and was completely oblivious to what he was doing. but obviously caught red-handed, and didn't remember what he was doing the day after he was arrested. And so it can be quite harmful in terms of causing behaviors that are out of character for while people are drug affected. And it's quite popular. And the risk of overdose on benzos, as it's a depressant, which I'll talk about later, is quite high. So something that we have to really be careful when working with young people who are using benzos, to educate them around the harms associated with benzodiazepines. Some of the others are cocaine or ketamine. They actually fall into different categories. So cocaine is different to ketamine. But popular with young people. Ketamine is often referred to as K or Ket, or it's quite popular in the dance scene. GHB is another one that's really popular, often referred to as juice, and sold in little soy sauce fish containers. Very cheap, very easy to get. And very potent. So only small amounts are needed for people to get the effect. Methamphetamine is the other one there. So methamphetamine, most common name for methamphetamine or crystal methamphetamine is ice. Very popular and common with young people, particularly in that sort of party scene, I suppose. Quite easy to get, quite potent, and has a long-lasting effect, and quite cheap for them to get their hands on. Prescription opioids, so some of them are morphine-based drugs, endone, OxyContin. They're also drugs that are prescribed by GPs. That little cup that's there is supposed to be methadone, so it's also an opiate-based prescription medication. We also see this picture down here, synthetic drugs or synthetic cannabis, which is sold in shops. It's not actually cannabis, it's just plant-based material with various chemical substances that I won't go into tonight, that cause similar effect to cannabis, to smoking cannabis, but has a whole lot of other dangers associated with it that aren't, for people that might have allergies or susceptibilities or predispositions to mental health or schizoaffective disorders, etc., that smoke synthetic cannabis. This one down here, nitrous oxide, or NANGs, which is it's most commonly referred to. So it's actually the whipped cream or the bulbs that you can buy from the shops, designed to put into the whipped cream canisters to whip cream up or serve whipped cream. Young people put it into balloons. So it's compressed nitrous oxide in these little bulbs that they expel into a balloon, and then inhale the balloon, which causes a euphoric effect, and can be quite dangerous because it actually displaces oxygen from the brain and can cause people to pass out, have all sorts of injuries, but also cause more longer-term damage due to lack of oxygen. Anabolic steroids, we don't see a lot of. We do come across it every now and then. So usually medication or steroids that people take when they're working out at the gym to, become usually bigger or fitter or stronger, or whatever the case may be. Inhalants is the other one. Comes in all sorts of different products. Usually the most common is young people sniffing glue or sniffing paint. So spraying or putting the substance into a bag and breathing the fumes of that substance in to get an effect off it. And the last one that I've got there is amyl nitrate, which is a muscle relaxant, similar to some of these other ones, nitrous oxide and inhalants. Amyl causes a bit of a head spin and euphoric feeling for a small period of time after inhaling it or breathing it in. Are there any questions? It's a lot of information that I've just provided, and it's all brief, and I could probably go into some of those substances in more detail, but they're just some of the substances that we see from young people coming into our service, requiring support for, and also some substances that sort of cause behavioural issues and dependence-based issues for young people. Is there anything that people want to know a little bit more about any of those? All good. And I've emailed Nishan. I've emailed this presentation to you, so if feel free to share it afterwards. I'm happy for people to have it afterwards. I'm just seeing a couple of things from the chat there, so I'll keep that. That's good. If you want, you can put things in the chat to I can try and get to them as we go. All right, move along. I'll ask a question to you. Why do you think people use some of these drugs? What are some of your experiences as to why you think people might use these drugs?
I think some reasons people might use these drugs is number one, for fun. Like especially people when you're surrounded with a group of others who are using.
Yeah.
You're the only one that probably don't use, and you go spit it out if you don't want it. Sorry, if just giving my daughter food.
That's okay.
Yeah, you're the only one who's not using, and maybe you feel left out and whatever. Peer pressure.
Peer pressure is a big one.
Have fun as well. Yeah, and then you can get caught up in using it, and if you've used it a bit few times, maybe just the effects of it, like the excitement in the beginning and things like that. And then of course, because they're addictive, then you're more likely to get addicted to it if you keep doing it repeatedly. I also think that apart from that, people use it to numb pain.
Yes.
Maybe they're going through a lot and stuff like that, and they've experienced it before, and they've experienced the feeling of feeling high or whatever, however they feel, because it seems like it feels good for those who have used it, because they seem pretty out of life.
Yeah.
I've never used it before.
They don't use it. They don't use it because that makes them feel bad. That's for sure.
Yeah. So I think that is what they look for. That feeling is what they look for, and if they don't have it, they probably just try not to cope with traumas and things of the world that they're going through.
Yeah.
In my opinion, that's what I think.
Spot on, Sidonia. Yeah, absolutely. People use drugs, most of the time, 99% of the time, people use drugs to experiment because someone tells them it's a good idea. They've seen other people do it. They hear how fun it is or how good it is, and they're curious. Nobody ever uses a drug to start off with to say, oh, I want to become addicted or dependent on this drug. So I don't think anybody has ever done that in the history of the world. So 9 times out of 10, it's because someone they know is doing it. Seems like a good idea at the time. They're curious. 99% of the time. And to be honest, 99% of people that try drugs don't have a problem with drug use. But occasionally, and it is rare, not only a small proportion of people that use drugs go on to have ongoing problems with drugs. But those that do, they're usually serious problems and need support to come off, or support to change those habits. And the reason why that is, some people experience issues relating to their drug use is, and in our experience, it most of the time relates to past trauma. or pain. And trauma is a personal thing, based on so many factors. Can be personal experience of trauma, generational experience of trauma, can be trauma pre-birth, so in utero. It can be childhood trauma that people might not have any immediate memory of, but it's impacted on their development as a baby, or it could be trauma as an adult, or ongoing trauma. So lots of varying factors related to pain. It could be physical trauma, it could be psychological, it could be emotional, it could be the trauma of somebody else that's caused that effect on them. So it's trauma has a huge impact on our ability to function as adults and children and young people. So we know that's a reason for people that might have ongoing issues that to use drugs, because, like you mentioned, Sidonia, drugs make people feel better. And when people are experiencing pain, whether it's physical or psychological pain, and they find something that's going to ease that pain, albeit for a short time, even if it's for a short time, they're going to gravitate towards that solution. And we know, that substances, people can become more tolerant, have lots of side effects, apart from, they're illegal, and a lot of times have a whole lot of other psychological and social impacts, and physical health impacts from their use. So, in some cases, medication, drugs are used by doctors to treat trauma. But the difference is that it's in a prescribed control manner, that's able to be monitored and managed, and has an evidence base to it. So lots of things. People use drugs to relax, to help sleep. So often so what the reasons we're talking about are, to self-medicate, to help numb emotions. Again, trauma comes up. People use drugs in smaller amounts and more controlled amounts, to celebrate and have fun. We'll use alcohol as a prime example of that. It's the socially accepted drug that we have in society. It's legal, it's available, and it's accessible. It's cheap, and to be honest, it's the number one drug that that people come and seek drug and alcohol help for, is alcohol. So it's not immune to having its own issues, as I'm sure we're all aware. Sometimes they use drugs to stay awake just as much as they use drugs to help them sleep. Certain situations or circumstances where people might work on night shift, or need to stay up for a particular reason. As we mentioned, self-medicate for mental health, and people are prescribed medication. So I guess when we're working with people who've got substance issues or are seeking help for substance-related issues, a big part of our assessment with those people is to find out why they're using drugs. What's their reason for using drug? Is it to help with past trauma? Are they using them to self-medicate for other mental health issues? What is their reason? And they are as individual almost as we are as individuals sitting in this room. It's a personal experience, and the first place that we start is to look at why people are using that particular or those drugs, and what reason, what they're hoping to get out of. And as you mentioned, Sidonia, it's peer pressure or to fit in is usually why people start. Any questions before I move on? So what I want to talk about next is, I guess,
Sorry,
yes.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Using, I mean, you try to figure out the reason why they started using. Do they usually know the reason? Like usually mostly able to adapt.
Sorry, you just dropped out that last bit.
Oh, sorry.
That's
Can
okay.
you hear me?
Yeah, yep.
Oh my God. Wait. I'm just wondering whether or not they actually.
Oh no, we lost her. That's all right. Hopefully Sidonia can come back in. She can ask her a question. I know what she's trying to ask. I'll respond to her when she comes back in. Oh, here she is.
Sorry.
Sidonia, we lost you.
Yeah. Do the young people recognize why they're using the substance when they come in?
Yeah,
or do you have to try and work with them to figure it out?
Yeah, it's a good question. You're right. Often they don't know. Often they don't realize that they're using because of a past trauma or to self-medicate. Sometimes they do. Sometimes that's their sole reason for using because it helps with the voices in their head, or it helps them sleep, or it helps them do certain things, or fit in, or coexist, or whatever. But you're right. Sometimes it takes a little bit of exploration. Often young people will come and say, what do you use? Oh, because my friends do, because I'm bored, because it's fun, sort of some reasons like that. But our job is to help them explore a little bit deeper around the role that those substances play in their life. And usually, it's through a bigger assessment, asking about past experiences and of just getting to know them and building a little bit of trust. Sometimes the young people know but don't trust us enough to tell them. So a big part of what we do is trying to build up that rapport, so that the young person feels safe to be able to talk about why they're using the drugs. So yeah, good question. Good question. So when a substance is harmful, when do they become sort of harmful to those individuals? Any ideas? Or why can they be harmful?
I mean, some of the reasons is if it starts to affect your daily living, like affecting your mental health, or just going into work or functioning without them. So I'd say that's when it becomes harmful, I suppose.
Absolutely. Yeah, when it becomes impacts on other areas of your life, whether it be social or emotional, psychological, physical, relationships, all of that sort of stuff. So I'll just flick these ones up here. So it's obviously legal implications, particularly around driving, not only roadside drug and alcohol tests, but car accidents, injuring people, all of those implications that come with being impaired. Impacts on physical health, impacts on mental health, isolation. We find, drugs, there's such a stigma associated with drug use. Either people don't understand it, so they don't want to talk about it, or because it's illegal, people are afraid to talk about it for whatever reason. But isolation is the biggest harm associated with drug use, and we find people that are detached or isolated from their community or their family or work, or some of those key areas in their life, are more likely to go on and have further problems and use more substances. So one of the key elements to treatment is to connect people back into a community, whether it be their community or a new community. It might be work, it might be education, it might be church, it might be their family, whatever that might be. It's really important for people to not feel isolated, and be connected Sometimes that isolation is self-imposed. So sometimes people, because of the shame and stigmas associated with drug use, people don't know how to deal with it. They don't they don't seek help. So it amplifies the problem. Other areas, family conflict, impacts on concentration, ability to concentrate at work or at school. It becomes a problem when people use drugs with other drugs. That's the number one reason for overdose, is when people mix even alcohol, but with other drugs. It doubles the effect, has uncertain impacts or effects on the person that can cause lots of harms. And we mentioned it before, so when people are dependent or addicted to drugs, particular drugs, when they try and stop using them, they can go into withdrawal. And the only thing that will make them feel better is, their brain craves that substance again. It's when drug use becomes normalized, and they need that to function. So, lots of harms associated with drug use, and some of them are I guess things to look out for, I suppose, and key things when people access treatment. I'm going to talk a little bit about harm minimization. Do people Have people heard of harm minimization or harm reduction? So we work in under what we call a framework, a harm minimization framework. And that, I guess, acknowledges that drugs are in our society. Sometimes they're legal, sometimes they're illegal. Regardless, people use them. What we do is, even if we try and make them illegal and discourage people from using them, they're still going to use them. So what we want to do is keep people safe, and teach people strategies that if they are going to use drugs, if they're going to choose that, that there are safer ways to do it. So some other examples of harm minimization strategies that aren't drug related. Can anyone think of any? Are there any that sort of come to mind? The first one is seatbelts in cars. So we all know that cars are dangerous. If cars have accidents, they're going to have accidents. People die, people get injured. There's a high rate of car accidents, but we don't ban cars. We certainly put laws around cars, and they're all harm minimization strategies to keep people safe. So rather than banning the car, we put a law in place that people wear seatbelts, because we know there's an evidence base that if people wear seatbelts in cars and they have a car accident, then they're going to be safer. So it prevents high levels of prevents death, high levels of injury, and ongoing trauma. Same with riding bikes. People fall off bikes. I remember a time, and it wasn't that long ago, that helmets weren't compulsory on bikes. People were getting a lot of head injuries, falling off bikes. The head was the main area that was getting injured and causing long-term damage. So they implemented a law for people to wear helmets on bikes, motorbikes included. So we know that reduces the risks. If someone falls off the bike, they're less likely to get a hand injury and walk away from that. Drug-related harm minimization strategies are needle exchange programs. So we know that people choose to inject drugs. They're going to do it by sharing needles. They're more likely to contract or pass on viruses, particularly hepatitis, HIV, and other bloodborne viruses. So that's one reason why we have a program where people can get clean needles. The other part of that program is it's a safe place for people to dispose of their needles. So what we were seeing before we had needle exchange programs was people were using drugs, leaving the needles out on the streets or putting them into rubbish bins, and people were getting pricked by those needles accidentally, so non-drug users, and it was causing harm further harm to people. So by having needle exchange programs, we drastically reduce those needle stick injuries. We drastically reduce the spread of bloodborne viruses such as HIV and hepatitis C. And, you know, it keeps the community safer. It reduces the burden of disease on the healthcare system. So for people seeking treatment for those bloodborne viruses, and it's so there's lots of harms reduced associated with those needle exchange programs. Another example is standard drinks. So alcohol, is served in containers or at venues. It's measured in standard drinks. We have learned about standard drinks so that we can stay under 0.05 when we're driving cars. There's a formula that, most people are taught. One standard drink an hour is pretty much the limit to keep people under a 0.05 blood alcohol concentration reading, so they're safer to drive cars. So to sum it up, I suppose harm reduction strategies, they reduce the risks and reduce those risk-taking behaviours that people exhibit when using drugs. It doesn't stop people using drugs, but it certainly reduces the harm. And I guess, and I'll get into the stages of change before, until somebody is motivated to start changing their behaviours around their drug use. And I'll say in the 20 years that I've been working in the industry, I've never met somebody that uses drugs that doesn't go through a period where they want that when they themselves want to do something about their drug use. So I guess our role as drug and alcohol clinicians is when the person's ready to stop using drugs, when they're motivated, and only when they're motivated, is the time where they're going to start to do something and change their habits. And that's when we step in as clinicians and drug and alcohol counsellors and support people, where we can help them take steps to want to change their drug use. Until then, our goal is to reduce the risks, and sometimes that's just about keeping them alive until they're ready to change. Maybe I didn't share sound. I'm just going to watch a quick YouTube video on harm reduction, but I might stop sharing for a second and then share with sound. So bear with me for a second. Okay. Are we back? Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Excellent. All right. I'll click on this video if I can. Let me know if you can't. Oh, that didn't work, did it? Try again. Hold on a second. Try another way. Okay. Can you see that now?
We can't see anything. Maybe try
Okay.
share your screen. Okay, now we can see it.
Now you can see? All
Yep.
right, beautiful. Thank you.
Cannabis is in the drug.
By 1980, illegal drugs were every bit as much a threat to the United States as enemy planes and missiles.
Did you know that most of the drug myths we grew up being told were based on fears and not facts?
I'm in the under nines. And I'm
I hate this. What's up? It's that ad for drugs. It's horrible.
Well, drugs are a big problem. Worries the hell out of your father and I.
How come?
Do any kids at your school do drugs?
Yeah, I suppose.
Well, that's why. What would you say if someone offered you some?
That's a good point. What would you say if someone offered you some?
I'd tell them no. Never know what it could do to you.
Propaganda from the Just Say No era that fueled the war on drugs. Harm reduction has been part of Australia's drug strategy since 1985. Harm reduction is about promoting health and empowering our peers with credible, non-judgmental information so people can make informed choices. It's about changing the narrative to just say no. Because drug use is criminalised, governments, researchers, even people who use drugs don't know exactly how many people use drugs. Only a tiny percentage need treatment, and most people keep their use a secret. The best data we have shows about 9 million Australians have used an illegal drug. Since there's no commercial quality control of an illegal market though, you can't really be certain of what you're getting. You may as well be having a random floor score, which about 18% of people who've used an illegal drug have admitted to doing.
There are peer-based harm reduction organisations around the world tailored to the nightlife and festival scene.
If you use drugs, it's important you know there are general harm reduction measures you can apply to reduce your risk. Consider set, setting, and drug, like you're doing a risk assessment. You, the human consumer, you're the set. Your overall health in the moment, your hunger, hydration, and genetic makeup influence the risk profile when taking a drug. The setting or environmental factors are an influence too. Set and setting are just as important to a drug-taking experience as the drug itself. So to practice harm reduction, you have to care about yourself, your environment, and about having reliable drug knowledge. One way to reduce the risks associated with drug use is to continue to ask the questions and remain curious. Some sources of information are more supportive than others. We must not underestimate the value of peer-based education, so we encourage you to discuss these topics with those around you who you trust. We don't agree with fear-mongering, judgment, or urban legends. We believe in evidence-based education. Don't be a victim of misinformation. You might want to consider doing a reagent test and try get an indication of what might actually be in a mystery baggie. But this is a very limited pill testing or drug checking option that does not eliminate the risk when you're using from an illegal market.
Dancewise have a large team of key peer educators. Check out dancewise.org.au. We are a health program of Harm Reduction Victoria and have a long history in drug and alcohol harm reduction education in the state.
If you still choose to use, you have the right to health. So make sure you're in the know. Have a quarter.
I might just stop it there. That's just an example of, I guess, where education comes into supporting people who choose to use drugs and keeping them safe. Did anyone have any questions? Anything that stood out in that video? One of the key takeaways, I think, was, and I mentioned it earlier, is one of the biggest harms associated with drug use is isolation and, stigma and illegalization of drugs creates isolation. So, we do everything we can to try and prevent people from becoming isolated. So, when they want to seek help, or if they need to seek help, then they're able to. And sometimes that help might come in the form of calling an ambulance for a friend. If somebody is experiencing difficulties or an overdose or not well, and there's lots of occasions where young people don't want to call an ambulance for fear of getting in trouble with the police because of the illegal nature of drugs. So one basic harm minimisation strategy is for young people to know that if they call an ambulance, then that ambulance won't call the police. All they're interested in is getting help for their patient. So, it forms a big part of the work that we do, which sort of leads me on to, I guess, what do we do while young people aren't willing to change? We're just providing harm reduction strategies and keeping them engaged, and our role is to keep them connected to our service if that's the only sort of positive thing that they're connected to in their life. And while we're doing that, we use a model called the stages of change. So I hope that's clear enough on your screens to be able to see. But it's I'll just flick to the next one. So this model is, you can relate to anything in your life, and it starts at this point here, where people enter the cycle, where they're pre-contemplative, where basically it means that they're not worried about their drug use, or not worried, or don't want to change anything about their behavior. We can relate it to stopping smoking, or getting fit, or eating healthier, or saving money, or lots of our sort of habits, lots of things that we do. You can relate the stages of change to. So the pre-contemplative part is not worried. I'm happy doing what I'm doing. Don't want to change anything about it. It's not causing any major negative impacts on my life. But I'm happy doing it. That we call that the pre-contemplative stage, where people aren't worried. Then usually what happens is something happens. If we can relate to getting fit, somebody might say something, or might be out of breath, or something might happen in relation to their drug use, where it causes somebody to start contemplating doing something about changing that habit, that particular habit. Drug related contemplation stages might be a family member, or there might be conflict because of that drug use, or it might be lack of money, or someone might have said something. So contemplation is when people start thinking about wanting to change. So it's just a stage that they move into from that pre-contemplative, or not worried, into thinking about doing something different. And often people go between these two stages. They think about it might be too hard, so they go back into the not worried stage. The next stage is getting ready. So, this is when we're working with our clients, and we're applying some harm minimization strategies. We're constantly using a mode of treatment called motivational interviewing, and that's constantly sort of testing the waters about identifying areas in the young person's life that they might want to set some goals for, or might want to change. So it's just getting them to think about their habits, think about their life, think about areas that they might want to change, to hopefully get them into a stage where they're thinking about getting ready to change. So they're preparing to change. And so that might be, going to visit a detox, or sitting down looking at options around detox, or identifying, reducing their drinking, or reducing their cannabis use, or, if we can relate it to fitness, it might be, looking at how much it's going to cost to join a gym, for example. So it's that preparation stage of getting ready to actually do something to start to achieve this goal. The next stage is action. So that is, might be going to detox, or it might be actually buying that gym membership, putting that into that thought, that thinking, that getting ready stage, putting it into some action. And that's easier said than done. And often, people will go, to and fro, or there's barriers, or, there's lots of things that happen. So once people have, they might have a gym membership for a couple of weeks or a week and start to go, or they might stop using a particular drug for a period of time. We call that phase the maintenance phase. So they're sticking to it. So they're sticking to the change that they've made to try and maintain or set up a new habit or a healthy habit. So we call that the maintenance phase. And the longer we can keep people in this maintenance phase, this action to maintenance phase, the better. So if we can keep people there for sort of 6 to 12 weeks, instilling new habits, healthy habits, then usually that habit sticks, and they're less likely to go back to older habits. Now, sometimes that new habit isn't just, so we set these big goals around becoming abstinent and stopping drugs completely, but sometimes they're just small goals. Sometimes we support people to go from drinking 12 beers a day to 6 beers a day. But it's heading in the right direction, and we celebrate that achievement. If people can reduce their drug use, that is still a success, as long as they're heading in the right direction and not using more. Nogoa, did you have a question?
Yeah, just going back just going back to the harm minimization.
Yeah.
So let's say if you're working with a minor, and
Yes.
obviously the parent has to be involved, how do you go on about trying to make the parent understand the side of harm minimization and things like that?
Yeah, look, we don't, young people 16 and above, or above 15, don't have to involve their parents. We come into YSAS. So under 15, we'll encourage the young person to engage their parents, but we try and maintain a confidential service. But when we always encourage young people to, as I said, isolation is the biggest killer. Connection is the key. So if we can improve relationships, then that's going to be better for the young person for sure. So when talking to, it's difficult because a lot of parents don't understand some of the harm minimization concepts. So we try and provide some education, support the parents with understanding the purpose of some of those harm minimization strategies, because for us, we're a voluntary service. So if a young person is in this pre-contemplative stage, not wanting to stop using drugs, and we're telling them that they have to stop using drugs, then they're not going to come back and see us. So I always say that the idea of the first appointment is to get a second appointment, and because we can't do anything with the young person if they're not coming back to see us for another appointment. So the primary focus in those early stages is to develop a rapport and trust with that young person, that they're not going to be judged, that we're here to help them with goals that they set and not goals that we set for them, or even necessarily their parents. So sometimes those early stages is a little bit about mediation. It's a little bit about helping the parents understand where the young person might be on the stage of change model, some of the harm minimization principles or practices that we might apply, and some of the reasons for some of those actions. But look, at the end of the day, the client is the young person is our client, and if they don't want to come and see us, then we can't do anything about it. So we need to work with the young person to ensure that they're feeling safe to be able to talk about these problems in their lives. And a big part of that is working with the parents. Sometimes though, if a young person's over 15, we're not actually allowed to talk to their parents unless they give us consent. So sometimes young people don't want us to talk to their parents, and we respect that. And legally we have to respect that. and without their consent, we don't share that information. Does that answer your question? Is that what you asked?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, it's a long answer. So the stages of change model. Often, what happens when people are in this maintenance phase of sticking to new habits, they might have a slip up. So they might go to a party, often sort of between that sort of 6 to 12 week mark, and people have been able to achieve a goal, especially if it's around abstinence. They get confident. They think, oh, I've got this. I'm not dependent anymore. I can go to a party. I can reward myself, for the effort. And they have what we call a lapse more so than a relapse. And often what happens when there's a lapse is there's a sense that all the hard work that they've put into to change a particular habit has all been undone. And a lot of negative emotions and feelings come associated with that: guilt, remorse, anger, frustration, letting people down, all of these negative emotions, which have often been the fuel for substance use in the past. So can very easily, a lapse can turn into a relapse. So we define a relapse as a continuation of those old habits. So falling back into those old habits, getting back into that pre-contemplative stage, not wanting to address it, not worried about the drug use. Might be an element of guilt there, but not wanting to change anything. So, working with people for a long period of time while they're in this maintenance phase, knowing that lapses, most people who have tried to change something in their life aren't able to do it the first time. They do go through different phases. So our role, if someone does have a lapse, is to try and get them back on the wagon and try and get them to focus on all the good work that they've done leading up to that 6 to 8 week or 12 week period, all the things that they have achieved. Remind them what motivates them. Stay on the positive side of things rather than slip back into that negative experience that fuels negative behaviors and responses and fuels drug use and all that sort of stuff. So, this is a really important model that we use, the stages of change model, alongside of motivational interviewing strategies to support people that are going through what we call pre-contemplative stages. They often come to us not wanting to do. If someone comes to us wanting to change or already in that contemplation or preparation stage, great. But it does take a bit of time to I guess set out a bit of a plan in terms of where those habits what those changes might be. So I've just about come to the end. The last slide is a little bit about help seeking. We see help seeking as a strength. We encourage people. Sometimes it's the fact that people don't know where to go to seek help. So there's a couple of numbers. Feel free to write them down or take a photo of the screen. Always in an emergency, 000, call an ambulance if you need to. But YSAS, feel free to call me, to call our Dandenong office. The other adult drug and alcohol service there is Cicada, 1800 142536. The Yoda is a YSAS website, so there's a lot of resources on the website that you can go and educate yourself. Yes?
I don't see the screen anymore. Is anyone else seeing it? You just have the screen up?
Oh, you can't see the screen?
Reading out? No? Is it just me?
No, I can't see the screen either.
Oh, my bad. I should have. Sorry.
Okay.
Now you can see it?
Yeah, can see it.
My bad. Well, I'll go. This is the stages of change model that I was talking about. Sorry, I thought you could see that. But there are some. Nishan can certainly share the presentation, but hopefully, if you can see that will help explain some of the things that I was talking about while I was talking about stages of change. So that's the cycle of change, or the model that we were talking about, with the different pre-contemplative, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance stages. My apologies.
That's all right. We can definitely share the stages of change, especially the that particular slide.
Yeah.
Refer back to if they want to learn more about the cycle.
Yeah, it's really important, that we sort of understand that people go through various stages, and you can relate it to so many different areas of your own life. Saving money all the time. So lots of different things that we're, as humans, we're creatures of habit. We get sort of stuck in our comfort zone, and that's good. But then sometimes that comfort zone gets a little bit too comfortable, and we want to do something about it. We want to shift. We want to change jobs, or we want to, change houses, or we want to, start eating healthier, or get back in contact with people that we haven't. Lots of different things. So hopefully that was helpful. Has anyone got any questions that I'm happy to answer?
So far so good. Thanks, Danny.
So far so good.
Well explained.
Sorry, I was trying to ask, but I was muted, so I had to find my way. How can I begin to engage in a conversation with a young person to seek help? Like, let's say I know a young person who is currently in the isolation stage, but like a self-imposed kind of isolation. And,
yes.
And I know also that the environment that he or she is in is not really supporting.
Yeah.
Maybe it's an environment that is toxic, and it's actually adding to his or her reason to use further.
Yeah, I would say so. There's a couple of things I would
because I don't want to take that sense of judgment.
Yeah,
because they're already properly on and that's why they're isolating. How can I talk to them and come in a place of love rather than judgment and shame?
Yeah, so I would, if you've got a good relationship with them, you can use that relationship and say something like, I've noticed you haven't been yourself. Is there anything I can do to help? And if you've got a good relationship and you suspect that they might be using drugs, ask them directly in a way that's not sort of helping them feel safe, that they're not going to be in trouble, or it's confidential. That they feel safe to be honest with you about their situation. And it might not be then, they might not answer you straight away, but it's important to leave the door open, and that they might be able to contact you, or if not you, a service, when they feel safe. The other thing that I would suggest is, if you know somebody that they do have a good relationship with, or a better trusting relationship with, to maybe have a word to them, to ask them, find that path of least resistance. But the most important thing is, as you mentioned, to come from a place of empathy, that they're going to be supported, and even if they don't want to do anything about their drug use, if that's what it is, if that's what they're using, they're still not going to be judged, because, as I said earlier, I've never met anybody that doesn't use drugs, that doesn't go through a stage where they want to change something about their drug use. So it's really important that door is open for them when they are willing to change or wanting to do something about it, that they need support.
Yeah.
No worries.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So feel free, if you haven't got any questions now, feel free to give me a call on that YSAS number there. During the day, we've got a whole team of staff that are willing to help. They're much better at working with young people than me. They're much younger than me, and a bit cooler and relatable for young people. I've been around for a long time now, so we've got great space that young people feel safe to come into. Most of our work is outreach. It's done in the community. We're able to come out and see the young people in their own space where they feel safe, or through Nishan's support and partnership, we're able to come out to the Nas Recovery Centre as well. So thanks everybody for listening to me talk a lot, but also thanks for your questions and thanks for your attention. I hope it's been helpful.
Thank you, Danny.
Thanks,
Thank you
Nishan.
so much. Yes,
You're
great
welcome.
Great topic. So yeah, I guess that concludes our session on stages of change and harm reduction. And as Danny said, so please do reach out. We're always willing to, if you can't do the conversation, we can speak to them, to the young people, that we have ways of reaching them, because like Danny said, it's about encouraging, supporting, and also just understanding that stages of change means people will go through stages and it's not one way direction. So just being patient with them and just letting them know that when they are ready, you will be there to support them. So, and it can be hard for parents, especially from a culturally diverse perspective. There's so much gap in terms of communication style and understanding.
Yes.
So it's not as easy. So that's why, if you can't do the conversation, bring the young person to the service when they are ready, and let somebody else who they may be able to listen to try, rather than just trying to struggle on your own with it. So
absolutely.
Thank you, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you guys next week.
Thanks, Nishan. Thanks, everybody. See you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.